Oops. Hi, John. Can you hear me? John. Oh. Um, can you hear me?
There we go. Yes,
Okay. You can hear and see me okay?
yes, and vice versa.
Yes.
Um, I I don't in some cases I use a headset
Okay.
to have even better sound quality. Hang on. Funny looking, but two. Not
Try
correct.
talking. Okay, yeah, I can hear you. Okay, good. Yeah, we are I don't know if Marquez told you our office was flooded like sometime in March. So we've been moved to another floor and let me see if I can change the background so you can see we're in like a little closet. Actually, I'm not sure if I can change it back, so I'm not going to change it. But um, we're just like surrounded by all of our boxes and our things, and
Oh,
so yeah, I needed to make sure that audio and visual worked okay.
yeah. Well, if you have a headset, that's great. But if not, I think we'll be all right.
I don't know if we do. So is it hard to hear me?
Well, it's funny because I have this hearing loss, and so the sort of spatial quality, it sounds like a little echoey or in a little tin canny. So,
Okay. I
but
wonder if we can.
I'm for most people, it's going to be fine. I've got the closed captions on, and we should be
Okay. I was gonna say I can see if I can go grab a headset. Let me just.
all right. Now, why don't you see? And I'm
We
in
got a
the
little time.
meantime, I'm
Yeah.
going to put the um,
Yeah. I'm just moving it.
oh,
Yeah.
Zach. There was a copy room? Yeah. You got to walk in. Okay. Okay.
All right, we'll try
Hey,
to.
John.
Oh, he's
Oh, yeah.
well, he if you step in and you say hi, he can see you.
Oh, there's Marquez. Hey, man.
Hey,
How's it going?
Elise has got this one solo, but I'll be
Yeah,
watching later.
we'll be great. All right. If she
All
calls out, you're in the room.
right.
And hopefully she's got crazy questions. All right.
Okay.
Oops.
How about now?
That's better. Yeah, thank you.
Is it? Okay. And I assume it works.
Yeah, hang on a second. I've got Paul Schley just emailed to say he didn't get the link. So I gotta send that out.
Okay, there I am. Where's my friend John? There you are. Share my screen. Alrighty. How's that?
Perfect. Got it. Let's see. I'll grab
This headset doesn't work with my hair, John. Gonna have to redo my hair now. Try it this way. A little better.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. And you weren't hearing yourself?
Well, I had to fix my hair.
Oh,
The headsets don't do great with, the clips and whatnot. So we'll make it work. We'll make it work. Have you guys been staying safe from tornadoes in your area of the state? Did you guys get anything crazy?
so far we're okay. And we have to hope that we make it through the day today because we just released school a half an hour ago and to get the kids home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So this
man.
this AI note taker thing,
Yeah, a lot of districts have those now. They'll send like a companion to come along into the meeting and take notes and listen. It's like a transcription.
I don't
Hi, Vicky. Congratulations.
Are you hearing people, Elise?
I am not, no.
Okay.
But Vicky
All right.
she's muted. Oh, now she's not.
Oh,
Hi, Vicky.
hello.
Hey,
Congrats. Can you hear me, Vicky?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me just see. Okay, there we go.
great. Well, we'll start a few. People are starting to come in, and I sent out the link here. Again. At least Scott Hickey's got some space birds regalia for you.
Yes. I'm so excited. I
It's
cannot
pretty
tell
cool.
you. I just, not only is it a fantastic example of school districts working together in this time of financial crisis, but I mean, what's better than a space bird?
Yeah, right, right, right. Somebody said there was a space stallion, and I don't know that the little cardinal is pretty aggressive. So,
I know he kind of looks like someone you don't want to mess with.
yeah, especially if he's flying in on a rocket.
Uh-huh. So I said, I don't feel like you're gonna see that kind of a mascot in the future. And so I told him, I was like, I have to strike while the iron's hot. I need to get some Space Birds merch.
There you go.
So he's
That's good.
bringing it to WASDA for me next week.
Nice.
I'm
Yeah, it
excited.
was funny because I must have just missed the email when it came out from the athletic director. And so I'm going to be on the second wave.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of demand, I heard.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. People are wearing that stuff. And it's funny because I was in Milwaukee for the Brewers game on Saturday and I bought one of their new logoed hats, which are pretty cool. I like those with the wrist.
Brewers has some cool stuff.
There's Dr. Schley. Good day, sir.
Good day.
See ya. All right, Elise, we will start in 1 minute. And you're flying solo today without Marquez, so
I know, I know. We'll make it through without him.
we will we'll limp along.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, it's 1 o'clock, so I'm going to start the recording and start the session. Hello,
Awesome.
everyone. Oh, there we go. It's recording. I'm John Humphreys. I'm Executive Director of the Wisconsin Association for Equity and Funding, a group that's been around for over 30 years, focused a lot on revenue limits and advocacy with the legislature around that issue. But one of the things we try to do is give tips and tricks for surviving budget challenges. A lot of our members are smaller districts where there's no business manager. So it fills an important kind of a role in the context of helping people learn some things that maybe aren't so obvious. And even for folks who are business managers, I think what's really neat about this is at least you work with a lot of school districts around the state. And so you see a lot of things that are more nuanced and neat opportunities for saving money and sort of on the revenue and the expense side. And so I'm pleased to introduce Elise Murn from Baird, a longtime friend and colleague. And Baird does all kinds of awesome work around the state. I know when I was a small district superintendent, my consultants from Baird helped many, many times. We made some really good changes in terms of leveraging categorical aid and debt defeasance and all kinds of good stuff. So it's really a pleasure to be with you. This is the third in our series of budget tips and tricks kind of workshops. The first one was, I think, high cost categorical aid, high cost special education aid. And then the next one was about, did we do Title I set aside?
Yep,
Yeah.
maximizing your title and IDEA dollars. Yep.
Yeah, okay, right. And this one is budget tips and tricks. So we're going to step away from the sort of specific case. And I'm really excited for this one because I think it's going to cover a lot of territory, and it's fun to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us again, and thanks to RW Baird for all of your work and your partnership.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us, of course. As John mentioned, just happy to work alongside school districts in as many ways, shapes, and forms as we can, doing what we can with the limited dollars that we have. So that is really the goal of today. And John's ask was, what are some out of the box revenue or expenditure tips that you see districts utilizing or not utilizing or not knowing that they can utilize as they build their budgets for next year? And the timing is great because, April, we're starting to wrap up 25, 26. We're doing those preliminary budget presentations. So hopefully some tangible things that today's presentation allows you to say, I have at least one thing that I can take back to my district today or on Monday, since it's a Friday. That's my goal for today's presentation. So as John mentioned, we work in school districts all across the state. We work in the largest school district in the state, and we work in the smallest school district in the state, and everything in between. So we see a lot. We utilize these tools in order to help school districts really understand, but then communicate their financials, because this financial transparency continues to rise to the top as districts are communicating with their stakeholders, their staff, etc. And as more districts are going to referendum statewide, that financial transparency piece is becoming so critical to how and what districts communicate. It's a budget conversation all year round. So we have these tools to help with those types of financial communication pieces. So feel free to reach out to learn more. But this is the team that gets to help. So up on top is our banking team that helps primarily with our capital planning, debt issuance, long-term levy and capital management strategy. Whereas on the bottom half of the screen, our school business solutions team, who you've been seeing on a number of these AEF webinars, we help with anything in the school business office. So superintendents who own a lot of the financial pieces, and then also bookkeepers, business managers, CFOs. We're working alongside them on their operating budgets and kind of all the pieces that go into the operating side and more. So This is the Baird team that gets to help you, and you get me today as we talk about our budgeting tips and tricks. So when I was first building out the presentation, I was thinking, what are some high level ways to think about the budget? And then we were able to kind of narrow it farther into what are some tomorrow items that I can put on my to-do list to see if we can enact in our district today, tomorrow. So we're going to start by talking about some budget focus areas as you're building 26-27. We will talk about revenue enhancements and then ideas for efficiencies, reductions or savings on the expenditure side. And then I'm happy to talk through if this is something that your district is realistically able to implement within the next fiscal year or so. Some of you may be doing some of these things already, and that's amazing and fantastic. And ultimately, if there's anything that I haven't shared today that you are doing, share for the good of the group, because rising tide lifts all ships, and I think that sharing is caring. So that's kind of what today is about. So please feel free to share, or if you have additional questions, stop me, raise your hand, drop it in the chat. I'd love to discuss. Okay, so taking it all the way out to the 10,000 foot view first. When thinking about our budgets on the revenue side, the revenue limit is going to drive the majority of your operating budget. Okay, so some of these tips and tricks that I'll share are largely going to exist outside of the revenue limit. This is something important to keep in mind as you're communicating potentially about an operating referendum. Oftentimes we have really well-meaning members of our community or members of our staff that say, well, if we just raised fees, or if we just had another fundraiser or bake sale, or some donations, like that would fix this problem, right? And while school districts are always open to additional forms of revenue, we really just need to keep in mind that the revenue limit is going to drive the majority of your operating revenue. So you need to understand what is happening within your revenue limit, what revenue limit variables are specific to you, and how they are shaping your financial picture. So we're not going to talk about the revenue limit today because it's, we're trying to find some other tips and tricks. That's a state formula that so far, after 30 or so years, is still intact. We'll be focusing on some of these other spaces, but first and foremost, keep in mind that the formula, a state mandated formula, drives the majority of your operating revenue, and making sure your board and community is aware of that as well. Paul, I saw a hand. I don't know if that means you agree. You want to, comment on that?
I was gonna look for the chat button and I clicked the wrong one, but yeah, just when you mentioned that, the fundraising, you're exactly right. We stopped charging for athletic events because we were only making 40 cents, less than 40 cents on a dollar. But if they do fundraising, putting that into activity funds is a better use of your money.
Right. Is it going to balance the budget? Probably not. And sometimes these choices they're more than just the financial. What's best for our school? What's best for our community? And that may rise above your 40 cents to help balance the budget, right? Which probably isn't going to do it. So that's a really good point. So when thinking about revenues, we'll focus on some of those other areas. And then when thinking about our expenditures, remembering again that your staffing, your people, make up the majority of your operating expenditure budget. Okay, so the majority of if you want to make a significant impact on your expenditure budget, it's likely going to be on the staffing side in some way, shape, or form. We are going to be evaluating other expenditure ideas as well, but when we're thinking about balancing our budgets or making long-term sustainable and fiscally responsible decisions, a lot of times we really have to look at what's happening in our compensation plans. within our district. So 10,000-foot view, kind of trying to stay focused on the big picture. These are our big drivers of our revenues and expenditures. We'll look at some of the other areas today to give some additional ideas. All right, so just to start on the revenue side, thinking about some ideas for enhancements, okay? What ways outside of the revenue limit can we really be enhancing our revenues in our general fund? So a lot of districts I'm seeing are looking more into program sharing and building sharing. So a lot of smaller rural school districts may not have enough kids to have a full volleyball team, or in the case of New Lisbon and Necedah, a baseball team. So actually, John, you should share that story because it's just too good not to. The name is bar none fantastic.
Well, we're doing a co-op for baseball, as Elise mentioned, and New Lisbon is Rockets and Necedah is the Cardinals. So they came up with a new mascot, and it's the Space Birds. So it's got a little cardinal in a spacesuit with a helmet and a rocket logo on his or her. It's little spacesuit. It's very cute, and maybe that's a fundraiser we should try is just making money on these new logo because Elise bought $100 worth of stuff. So
I did. When I told my husband about the new mascot, he was like, "That's so cool. Who else has a space bird mascot?" I was like, "No one. We gotta strike while the iron's hot here."
there you go.
I love supporting my not so local school districts, however I can. But point being, where does it make sense to share programs or opportunities for space rentals, right? Men's basketball league in the gym at night. Head Start if they're looking for a space to rent your facilities. Those are some ideas if you haven't considered them yet. Summer school. This is getting a lot of discussion lately because summer is imminent, right? You want to carefully weigh the cost benefit analysis of adding or expanding summer school programs against the revenue that you might be receiving on the revenue limit. So just keeping in mind that your summer school count is going to be based on minutes, days, and number of pupils enrolled, resident pupils. And what is the true cost of offering or staffing those summer school programs? So before you decide to expand your summer school offerings, maybe reach out, happy to do an analysis alongside you, reach out to our team to make sure that that's kind of a true revenue raising endeavor.
Lisa, I was talking with someone the other day about this, and they said that they simply say that school is starting again in August, late in the month, and they have, I want to say it was 8 or 10 days of school in August. They don't call it summer school; they just say the buses are running, and then those are summer school days, and they have all their kids, and their teacher's contract was never reduced in the time of COVID, so they kept those days in their teacher contract. They don't have to pay extra, and they come up with additional FTE that way outside of the regular school year. So it was a really creative solution. It was a neat way to leverage that. And I want to talk a little bit about another piece of summer school for kids with special needs, but do you have any other special stories with regard to summer school to share in your hearing?
Yeah, well, so you mentioned that you may be a week or 8 to 10 days, but I've even heard of like a back to school practice day. It's offered in August. It's like a dry run for getting everybody back to school, getting on the schedule, and they just come to school, they find their locker, they do a handful of minutes that they can still count the entirety of basically the student, whoever comes on those back to school practice days. So that's the only other addition to that summer school count.
If memory serves, it's like 41,000 some hundreds of minutes per FTE. Is that right?
Yep.
So share more a little bit, if you would, about the balance that you're talking about for expense versus revenue. I mean, if you get another FTE, depending on your revenue limit, it's about $12,000.
Yep. So as John mentioned, um, number of minutes, number of students. There's a calculator out on the DPI website that can help you back into the potential additional FTE for summer school. Keep in mind on the revenue limit, summer school FTEs are prorated. Okay, so you get to essentially count 40% of your summer school FTEs for the revenue limit purposes. So 40% of that 12,000 or what have you is really kind of the number that you have in mind. And then would that offset creating a new program such as wrestling or weightlifting? If you plan to create those as a summer school class, does the cost of the teacher or the number of students you might enroll in order to attract or increase your summer school membership, is that going to outweigh the cost of adding a program or offering the additional summer school offerings?
Or do you have a kind of a rule of thumb that you guys use?
Oh, well, you definitely don't want to lose money. A lot of summer school programs do lose, they do end up losing money when you kind of put the numbers together. Ideally, you are creating or offering a program that breaks even. Is That would be my recommendation, but we'd be happy to kind of look into it more. And there are reasons sometimes why a summer school isn't breaking even, and so then we have to evaluate whether or not kind of the offerings, if they're critical, more important than the revenue that they're generating.
So here's a little twist on that that I like to talk about because I spend a fair amount of time working on special education matters. And that is that children with special needs who qualify for what's called extended school year, those costs are aidable with categorical aid for special education. So in that sense, you could be getting back your categorical aid in addition to the FTE, whatever you're spending on those students, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I see it's kind of interesting because I think a lot of special education directors sort of shy away from what's called ESY, extended school year. But um, my my feeling on it is there's three criteria to qualify: regressions of skills, recoupment of skills takes too long, or emerging skills. And if I'm getting the categorical aid back on these students, that balance of cost and compensation comes in, it sort of weighs out differently. And then the other thing is, I just feel like I get a huge return on that summer investment for students with IEPs.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm bringing them into school and helping them learn those emerging skills, which can be applied to things like emerging skills in decoding and building reading fluency, things like that. It's a pretty good rationale for having the kids back in the summer, and then the cost, the compensation sort of rebalances that equation.
Yeah. Sometimes it's definitely beyond just the numbers, right? The black and white side of it. What other benefit are we reaping by offering these programs, right? That's an important thing to keep in mind. Well, that actually lends itself well to the next point, your fees and fines. On the summer school side, they are pretty strict about what gets charged as a fee. It truly needs to be able to kind of be above and beyond. And if you're charging fees for summer school, you need to be able to point directly to that expenditure for the purposes of summer school costs. So keeping that in mind. But on the fees and fines side, um, I have policy and practice listed here because a lot of districts have a policy related to their fees, what they charge, or they have an outline of what their fees are, and policy related to fines. But not every school district practices their policy. So it's a good time to review what is our policy? Are we practicing it? And that doesn't necessarily mean that your practice needs to change. It may mean that your policy can be under review and changed as well. So you can always increase fees or increase fines. Again, keeping in mind they're likely less than 1% of your total operational budget, but something to keep in mind. Enhancements, revenue enhancements, state trust fund loan. So many districts know this, but if you don't, school districts are authorized under the revenue limit to borrow up to $1 million in non-referendum approved debt, without going to petition, without going to their community, essentially to ask for permission. So I mentioned it needs to be under $1 million. It's considered Fund 38 debt, and you really just need to have board action in order to approve that borrowing. Now, keep in mind, it's a loan. It's just like any other loan in that you will need to then be paying it back over a period of time. So the duration, the term of the loan will dictate the principal and interest that needs to be paid back on it. So you'll have that revenue enhancement, certainly, in order to address maybe a larger capital need that you may have. But your operating expenditure budget then will need to include a principal and interest payment in order to pay back that loan. So a little bit of a
That's
give and take there.
that's interesting. I met the guy who sort of runs that program at the school boards conference back in January. And I think the rates are really quite good. So if theoretically you need to go to short-term borrow for periods of time when the state aid has run out and you're expecting new state dollars, it might be, rather than going on the open market, it might be nice to turn to the state trust fund.
Well, and we see most districts not utilizing it for short-term needs, but for larger capital projects. So, for example, a district that I'm working with needs to replace their fire panel system, and it's going to be $100,000, and they don't want to pay for it out of their fund balance or out of their operating budget. They would rather pay for it over a 5-year period of time or pay back that loan over a 5-year period of time. So, we see districts taking out state trust fund loans for capital projects, or in some cases, not ideal, but operational loans. I think what you might have been thinking of more specifically, John, and that's if and when a district cannot pay back their short-term obligation, like you mentioned, the periods of cash shortfall, like if they're so short that they aren't able to pay back that line of credit, we've seen some districts have to take out a state trust fund loan in order to really just infuse their fund balance to such a point until they can pass an operating referendum, usually is the case. So maybe not for short-term instruments, but for larger capital projects and purchases, for the state trust fund loan.
Sure. Well, and $1 million is not small. I mean, that's, if you're getting a good rate there and it's cheaper than borrowing more or selling more bonds, why not use it?
Right. Usually the scope of the project will help to dictate if a state trust fund loan is appropriate. And then if you have Fund 38 debt outstanding, you need to keep that in mind as well. You can only have up to $1 million in Fund 38. So if this loan would take you above and beyond that $1 million, there are some rules regarding the petition process. So reach out to our team for more info if you're thinking you've got a larger project that needs taken care of and might fit within that range. And then, of course, an enhancement to revenue would be a referendum of some kind. I'm sure everyone on this phone call is aware of how a referendum can enhance your revenues, either one time or ongoing. Tools and efficiencies on the revenue side. So just keep in mind, we have spent the last couple of sessions talking about ways to be strategic and enhance your special education revenues and how to leverage your Fund 27 dollars. That is certainly something to keep in mind. Similarly, kind of a tool that's available at the state level, I suppose, the open enrollment per pupil dollar amount is increasing next year. Again, so if you're a net open enroll in district, that could definitely help enhance your revenue budget. So just being aware that that dollar amount does go up next year. Don't budget the same amount for in next year's budget. Do the analysis on the FTE and the per pupil dollar amount. Fund 80. So just curious on the call here, we got 20 people. Who already has, just if you use the little reaction button, who already has a Fund 80 established in their district? Okay, I see the little numbers creeping up. 8, 9, 11. Okay. So just as a reminder, Fund 80 is a community service fund. It is used to fund services that are primarily used. The function is to serve the community. Okay, so the programs need to be community-based in nature. They cannot be restricted to the school day. They cannot be restricted to anything that is meant to serve the school district student population in specific. So that's first and foremost rule. That said, um, oftentimes in public school districts across the state, middle school sports are available to all students in the community. The local parochial school may not have enough individuals to field a full basketball team. And as a result, they co-op and team up, partner up with the public school district. And then you have essentially a community team. And for that reason, a lot of oftentimes middle school sports are considered eligible for Fund 80. Um, so that's really just kind of an offset to your Fund 10 expenditure budget. So I know we're talking about revenue enhancements, but Fund 80 will come up in a few ways. For middle school sports, so that is a common use of Fund 80. But then additionally, a lot of school districts have things like weight rooms, the gym, the pool, and it is open to the community, but districts struggle to quantify the costs of keeping the gym open, keeping the weight room open, keeping the pool open for the community, and calculating the impact for the purposes of Fund 80. Now, the DPI is pretty strict about what utilities are eligible to be coded to Fund 80. So in the school district of Ladysmith, where I assist, we've essentially created a calculation that demonstrates how many hours of a 24-hour day the pool, the weight room, and the gym are open to the community. And there's a percentage then that we apply to costs that we believe need to be charged to Fund 80 in order to kind of make it work. So what costs then can we charge to Fund 80 pays Fund 10 for those costs that Fund 10 has essentially been covering on behalf of Fund 80. So we all know that the cash account is probably the same, but you can levy additional dollars in Fund 80 in order to kind of help to offset some of those costs.
That's
So,
good. Have you heard other creative uses of Fund 80? We just used it to provide mental health referral services in the community and in the schools. So there's an organization that you can make a referral to, and they'll take the person's insurance information and connect them with resources in the community for mental health and social services support. And it was a Fund 80 expense because it went out to our law enforcement, went to clergy. It was a nice thing, not necessarily an offset like you're talking about, but it was a neat service to be able to offer.
mm-hmm. Yes. I think there are a lot of eligible and DPI approved ways to use Fund 80. I caution people to code costs there without running it by the DPI and your auditors, because ultimately there's a penalty if there are ineligible funds booked to Fund 80. So if you have any questions, certainly reach out to our team. And as I mentioned, I always reach out to the DPI to say, this is how I would expect that it fits in Fund 80. Do you agree or
And
disagree?
they don't publish a hand list.
They have a decision tree out on their website that can help.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
really the crux of it is, would this expense exist if Fund 80 did not exist? And if the expense exists for Fund 80, then it's eligible. If the expense would be something the district would offer otherwise, then it's probably not eligible. It's probably
So
belongs in
anybody on
Fund
the
10.
call, we've got 21 folks here. Anybody else have interesting Fund 80 ideas? You can just unmute.
Or maybe some will have some ideas, or this has spurred an idea, or at least something to double check within your own um, accounting. If you're thinking, hey, middle school sports really could work for us, maybe it's only $8,000, but for next year, is that something then that if you don't have a Fund 80 yet, that your board could be approving at your next annual meeting? So,
And is summer recreation stuff, is that part of, I mean, even if it's not middle school?
so that's tricky and you have to be very cautious, because if you're counting it for summer school, you're getting summer school revenue on in that case, and then it likely would not be eligible for Fund 80. So rec department versus summer school needs to be very clearly defined. So good clarifying question.
No, I can't offer much help on summer school when it comes to Fund 80 or anything with Fund 80, because in Cornell we don't levy a Fund 80 at all. And I know
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are probably like, well, why wouldn't you? It's extra money. But you have to remember that that's totally on your taxpayers' backs, and
Mm-hmm.
you get no state aid on that. So for me, it's very expensive, especially with a property poor district. My tax levy would jump considerably, even with $100,000 levy. I know this last year we calculated what three voucher students at, I think it was like $38,000, raised my levy by 3%.
Yep.
So be cautious too if you're looking at doing it in a really highly aided district.
Mm-hmm. Or if you receive no aid whatsoever, and then to Paul's point, every additional dollar is borne by the local taxpayer. So definitely it's a revenue enhancement that you're taxing for, but is within the authority of the school board to approve. So then moving on to some other revenue tools and efficiencies. So categorical aids provided from the state to go towards specific services or purposes. Okay, so things like common school fund revenue, high cost transportation aid, sparsity aid. Um, Per pupil categorical aid is obviously the biggest one and the one that most people are familiar with. But thinking in specific, okay, so for example, common school fund revenue or the library aid, those dollars oftentimes, districts say, I can't figure out any. We have so many census students. For example, if you have a high Mennonite Amish population, they'll get included for the count for your common school fund revenues. So you'll have 1,000 census students to count for common school fund library aid, and not that many revenue limit FTEs. So we see a lot of districts getting creative with their common school fund revenues, doing things like replacing the smart board in their library, and then they'll retire the library from their smart board to a classroom. Okay, so they'll kind of phase in smart boards via the library to classrooms throughout a certain period of time. Similarly, they'll replace a Chromebook cart that is plugged in and housed in the library. So they'll replace all the Chromebooks with common school funds for the library cart. Books to be used and purchased for fourth grade curriculum, the curriculum related to covering Wisconsin, I believe, is eligible for common school fund revenue. So there are some creative ways to use it. Just if you have your librarian, if I'm forgetting the term for it, but you need to have like a library manifest that is updated to kind of reflect what you would like to accomplish within your library or school library for the year. So that's an example, an idea. Sparsity aid has two tiers, and there are some pupil thresholds that you should be aware of if you are a school district who receives sparsity aid. Sparsity aid is given if you have fewer than 10 members per square mile. And if your population is above or below 745, you receive two different tiers of sparsity aid. So if you believe that you, and then above or below 1,000. So if you believe that you might be on the cusp of receiving or not receiving sparsity aid, we can help you run the analysis to see if it wouldn't make sense to maybe undercount some summer school kids so that you can receive additional sparsity aid. That could be an idea, but it only applies to a certain number of districts over a period of time. So that one's pretty specific.
So it's not something that gets automatically calculated. You have to go out and apply for that.
Sparsity aid is automatically calculated. It's based on your EQ aid membership. And so EQ aid, one of the counts for EQ aid is summer school. If you're on the cusp of getting a higher tier of sparsity aid or a lower tier of sparsity aid based on your membership, that's something you could or should be aware of.
So Elise, if somebody was right on that cusp, they could still offer the same summer school programming, but don't count it, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And you'd have to balance there's a cost benefit analysis to then the revenue limit revenue that you would not be receiving against the sparsity aid that you would be receiving. So in Ladysmith, they were at 747, which put them into the first tier of sparsity aid, which is $100 per student. And so by simply undercounting 2 summer school FTEs, we unlocked $400 per student 1 year early, really just by undercounting summer school for 1 year. By the next year, we had so much declining enrollment that it was there was no amount of undercounting that would have helped us, but it expedited our sparsity aid for 1 year.
Money. It's good. Nice.
Like I said, it applies to only a handful of districts. So if you think you might be on the cusp, please reach out. Federal grants we've talked about extensively in AEF, but making sure that if you're a district who may be struggling to balance your budget or you're looking for strategies before, or if you've recently failed an operating referendum, can you utilize your federal grants to try to cover kind of current year costs to the degree that it is allowed within the grant in order to help balance your budget? Local grants and partnerships, hopefully maximize a lot of those local relationships. There are, I know a number of very astute superintendents who spend a lot of time writing grants, and you have to kind of balance that against what you have available for your own time writing for all these local grants, but certainly opportunities there. And then we talked at length about high cost special education aid with our first webinar, so I won't spend too much time on that. So with
except to say that I think that the high cost special education aid reimbursement level is going to be going up substantially. So if you can get kids above that $30,000 limit or threshold, I should say, it's a nice way to leverage some additional aid. I remember from our high cost webinar that there were quite a number of districts that weren't applying for any high cost special aid at all. That might change, and it's a sum certain, or it's a sum certain. I was getting those confused. So it might not be 90% by the time we get everybody figured out, but it's still better than what it was, and it's a potential nice place to leverage some additional income.
And some districts were concerned initially when the application opened that MPS was going to take all of it. Well, they didn't apply. So the opportunity for more districts to utilize it this year is definitely available. It's closed for this year, but for those of you who did apply for it, you should expect hopefully to receive more than you did last year.
Yeah,
least.
we in the webinar Elise is talking about, it's on our Facebook or YouTube channel. We looked at some low-hanging fruit, like if you have kids who are attending specialized programs that are expensive, boy, that's an easy one. You get that bill and you know exactly what the dollar amount is, and you can submit that, and it's pretty straightforward.
So revenues, definitely more ideas here. Is there anything that we didn't touch on the revenue side that anybody would like to share for the good of the group?
Elise, the one, happy to have other folks jump in. The one that I was wondering about a little bit, and I know I did this last year. I had one of those high cost kiddos who was open enrolled, and it was kind of a legacy kind of a situation. But there's a bit of open enrollment excess costs for special education. You're familiar with that?
Yes, I believe so. Yep. So they'll get
So
the special ed open enrollment fee and then anything beyond the cost of that student.
yeah, you can get from the resident district if they were
Hmm.
open enrolled in. So yeah. Anybody
So
else
think
on revenues?
probably more. But moving on to expenditures then, thinking about things like savings, enhancements, etc., when and if and how they might be available. So, as we mentioned, salaries and benefits are going to make up the majority of your operating expenditures. So, on the savings side, reducing FTEs is going to help your district kind of save the most, truthfully. Combining grade levels, if it makes sense. I know it's not ideal, and a lot of boards and communities are against it. But if you are such a size that it is imminent to stay viable, then that might be something you need to evaluate. Um, Review your calendar and scheduling. So if you have a art teacher or a phy ed teacher, are they getting paid for a full FTE but working, a half day, especially between buildings, at the elementary school and then at the middle high school. Uh, can you share one position across multiple buildings? Is that an option or feasible for you? And in their down periods, if they are not teaching or having instructional time, where else can they be useful, depending on what their license allows them to do with it throughout the school, right? So maximizing your scheduling are some of those teachers that might have more downtime than others. Um, Increasing the premium share, of course, for employees, not popular, but uh, necessary in some cases. Reducing or eliminating certain benefits, reducing or eliminating certain insurances. These are definitely strategies if you're looking to quickly balance your budget or you've failed an operating referendum and need to kind of come up with some strategies to address deficit budgets in the future. Um,
I'll chime in again there. We're going to have a webinar coming up here in the next few weeks. Next week, we've got a market analysis thing going on, market update. But I'm going to try for the week after that. The state um, insurance pool allows school districts to buy in. And the renewals are based on that huge pool. Every state employee plus a whole bunch of school districts and municipalities are part of that state pool. So you don't get a renewal amount based on usage. It's the overall negotiation that the state does. Folks haven't heard a lot about this. I've been a little bit surprised. So we're going to have a webinar on that. And actually, the timing is good. It's actually a calendar year cycle that they work on. So we'll
mm,
do that here later in April or early May, and then they would be looking at starting in January. But it can be a little expensive to get in, but once you're in, the increases are really minimal, which is I think going to be a real win for a lot of people who are in this situation of eliminating and negotiating insurance costs. I'll also share that Chad Trowbridge from Chippewa Falls did a webinar for AEF, it was a year or so ago, about saving on health insurance costs, which might be, economy of scale for a larger district like that. But there was some really interesting pieces of that puzzle, and Chad's a real bright guy and he's done a lot of work with that.
it's becoming such a large part of so many of our operating budgets that if you accept 25% renewals, it's going to get away from you very quickly. So managing health insurance is a primary factor it's a primary role function of the job. So understanding options available to you in the health insurance space is definitely huge. Sharing staff between and within the district. I mentioned, some of your special teachers that might need to be utilized elsewhere within the district, but then among our neighbors as well. What positions can we share among us to help offer the best opportunities for students and be cost effective and manage those costs. As it relates to external options for staffing, there are some shared staffing services, specialized teachers, virtual teachers, those types of things, business office staff. There are some external options, certainly, and then maintenance staff as well. Can you share buildings and grounds? Can you share? I've seen a couple shared superintendent positions. I've seen a couple shared special ed director positions. Now, especially in the case of superintendents and special ed directors, is that what's best for kids? That needs to be determined, certainly. The financial side is one thing, but what's best for kids is really the paramount before you start sharing some of those student-facing positions. So I have the 5% change in teacher FTEs and the 10-year change in teacher FTEs. So to kind of layer that in alongside the statewide enrollment trends that we've been seeing over a similar period of time. Because the fact is that reducing staff is going to provide the most savings, but over this period of time, so we all know this, that statewide, nationwide, worldwide, kids, there aren't as many children. Enrollment is going down. Okay. So this kind of shows that total FTE decline. This is the September FTE decline over that same period of time. And then when you layer in the staffing trend over a similar period, you'll notice that it's not at the same rate. Now we know that we can't reduce staff in lockstep with the loss of students. However, if you haven't reevaluated or evaluated your staffing related to your student population, you really need to, as a part of annual and 5-year forecasting, planning for reductions in order to ultimately kind of right size your district. So this trend is demonstrating really that there hasn't been a meaningful reduction in staff. Now, in sharing this with some of the superintendents in CESA 10, the response was, well, that's because we've had to hire more special education staffing in order to kind of keep up with student needs. We can't reduce staff, or we may be reducing regular ed staff in order to hire more special ed staff to keep up with the changing demographics of our students. So that could be an anecdotal response to this trend, but evaluating staffing, regardless, is going to be a critical part of evaluating future budgets.
Yeah, Elise, the other thing is this is total staff FTE. We might be replacing a teacher with a para. We need somebody for supervision. We need somebody to sort of reinforce instruction and lessons. So our FTE doesn't look any different, but our number of teachers, which is interesting. You've got a 3.7% decline in teacher FTE up there. Mm-hmm. That's pretty significant. So that the total staff FTE doesn't look like it's changing. The teacher FTE is going down.
Yeah. So outside of salaries and benefits, these are some other areas for evaluation and review. So in the space of non-capital and purchase services, is it possible to create some kind of a purchasing partnership? I know there are some CESAs that get together to do things like purchasing paper together and getting a discount. So something like that, or for equipment, could that work or make sense in your district? If you haven't switched to LED lighting yet, is that an opportunity or a space for savings? Are there some areas where you could get some focus on energy rebates or some E-rate reimbursement for your expenditures. There are some small building focused or classroom focused initiatives. As an example, I heard of a superintendent who took away all of his teachers' mini fridges because they were too expensive and they had failed their operating referendum. And I know that might not be a very popular choice, but in their case, it saved them money. He had their maintenance director then every single night did a pass through in every single building, turning off every smart board, every computer, every modem, every light in the building as a part of his closing down process in order to save on energy. And it may seem or may not seem like a lot, but every little bit helps, especially when you're trying to communicate to your community that you've really done everything. Tools, there are vendors available to help with energy studies. I know CISA 10, I believe, does that regularly. I am also aware of a few vendors who will put meters on things like your pool, or they'll put meters in your cafeteria in order to more closely and accurately track the utilities that are flowing through certain spaces of your buildings. So as an example, if you have a meter in your kitchen that indicates how much gas, heat, electric, etc., is being generated via your cafeteria, i.e., your food service program, could you be charging some utility fees to food service if your food service program is in the black? That's an example. Similarly, in Fund 80, if you put a meter on your pool, if you put a meter in your weight room, that allows the auditors to more clearly associate utility costs with a specific program instead of just saying, the cafeteria uses 10% of our energy or electricity throughout the day, and that's how that works. The auditors will, and the DPI will require data in order to back up that calculation. So just before you implement any of those, make sure that you have all of your T's dotted and I's crossed before you do that. Efficiencies and external options. If you don't have replacement cycles for things like Chromebooks, smart boards, etc., get those going. Curriculum, textbooks, those things can be very costly. And if you don't have a cycle in place and you are replacing social studies, science, and math all in the same year, that's a significant budget impact. So try to stagnate those as much as you can. If you can standardize equipment between buildings, that certainly helps with the types of replacement parts and the cost of those replacement parts district-wide. If you can limit the number of POs per month so that your maintenance director isn't going up to ACE every day, but instead is going to ACE once a week, does that help eliminate costs? Looking at your busing routes and putting minimums and maximums in your contracts. Oftentimes we see busing contracts are aligned with CPI. We recently renegotiated with our bus contractor to have a ceiling and a floor so that it would never go below a certain dollar amount and it would never go above a certain dollar amount. And it protects us from years where CPI might be 8%. So those could be some ideas as well. Capital objects, preventative maintenance as best as you can. If you're able to take care of things at $10,000 a year for 10 years instead of $500,000 at a crack, is that more efficient for you? Are you in a position where you need to start looking at consolidating facilities? Maybe it's something you never explored because you didn't have to, but you have an elementary school and a middle high school. Would it be more cost effective to close your elementary school and move everyone to one building? Might it be time to invest in evaluating the cost savings of something like that? Tools for capital objects. Fund 46, if you don't have one yet, please start one. You can, there's a 5-year wait period from the time that you start your Fund 46. It's a segregated account for long-term capital planning. It's just another tool in your toolbox. Reach out to our team if you'd like more info on Fund 46. Brian, question on Fund 46.
Different fund came up today, Fund 41. What do you know about that?
Yes, Fund 41 is another long-term capital planning account. How and when and why they are used is different. Fund 41 falls within the revenue limit. And so any levy into Fund 41 is going to kind of take away from what you can levy in Fund 10. So it's limited by the revenue limit. It's set as a part of your levy setting process at the beginning of the year. The scope of what can be used for Fund 41 is different than Fund 46. I believe Fund 41 is limited more specifically to like equipment and maintenance. Fund 46 is more broad because it's approved by the board and it's a long-term capital plan. Anything that's on it within reason can be approved for long-term capital planning. Fund 41 is treated differently in the EQ aid formula. The costs are spread out over the period of time that you've levied into Fund 41. So Fund 41 is a kind of a long-term plan. We see it more typically implemented by school districts who are negatively aided. The reason for that is because the costs are divided over the duration of that you've levied into the fund. And so your impact to shared costs it's spread out over a greater period of time. So a school district such as Mukwonago, who's had a Fund 41 for, over 20 years, if they spend out of their Fund 41 $1 million, for the purposes of shared costs, that $1 million gets divided over the 20 years they've levied into the fund instead of 1 year impact, $1 million impact for the purposes of aid. So Fund 41 and Fund 46, both long-term capital planning funds. One is implemented at the beginning of the year. One is used as a lever at the end of the year, typically. Fund 46 has a 5-year wait period once it's established. And then the costs or how the expenditures are aided is different for each. So, Brian, that was just I probably did the smallest amount of clarification that I could have on Fund 41 and 46. But if you want to look and see if Fund 41 makes sense for you, your district, based on how you're aided and how you budget, our team would be happy to help.
Thanks, Elise. Appreciate that. When you fail your operating levy, you have to start searching into avenues you've never looked in before.
Absolutely. Hence your attendance on today's call, Brian. I hope I've given you something, right? More than something. Some other ideas, like I mentioned, shared equipment. Could you share the snow blower, the lawnmower, the bus, the van, etc., with your neighbor? Does that make sense? Could you create an agreement where you're both able to kind of share that liability? Leasing something versus owning something. Are there times where that might make more sense? And then for efficiencies, a facility study is going to help you really look at your long-term liabilities and what is coming down the pipeline. So absolutely recommend doing a facility study. A lot of vendors will do it at no cost, assuming that at some point there's a referendum where they'll get paid down the line. Making sure you have replacement cycles in place for a lot of your equipment. And you do have to think long-term about the state of your facilities. You have to do a long-term capital plan and make sure that there is a plan in place to address the needs that are coming for your district down the pipeline.
Elise, quick question for you with regard to the leasing question. I can remember leasing Chromebooks.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any sort of a rule of thumb about the types of things or I know I've seen those calculators where it's like buy versus lease a car, and I've not done that. I've not leased a vehicle, but on a personal level. But I'm wondering if you guys just say, you want to lease this but not that, and if there's things like Chromebooks are things that you turn over relatively quickly.
Right. Yes. I think it depends. It's a case by case basis. We know some districts who lease their copier machines. We know some districts who lease some of their vehicles and their equipment. So in some cases, for some districts, a lease might make more sense than outright owning or replacing certain things. So it's kind of a not the best answer, but it depends, I think, on the district and the equipment in specific.
Anybody on the call have anything that anybody done that and made that analysis?
We actually just did some analysis on leasing and versus continuing with what our proposed purchase cycle would be for Chromebooks. And it ends up being at least double the cost to lease in our particular case. And so it just doesn't make sense when you can buy it outright, and then it probably will last longer than what that cycle would be inherently. So at least that's the case for us.
How many Chromebooks would you be looking at?
Well, so it would be phasing it in through time because there's been no cycle thus far. So we kind of have to start something. So we had gotten a quote just to phase in the first cycle of about 90 devices. But over time, so at first it looked like a great price tag, but then over time, as you think about what it means as you roll in year 2, 3, 4, it became not a cost-effective measure.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Taylor. And depending on the equipment, again, it could depend, but happy to answer any questions or help if you are undergoing that analysis. I'm aware of our time, so I won't go into too much detail, especially in this one, because I know we've talked about this on previous webinars. Okay, so with special education, first and foremost, ensuring that you are in compliance with all state and federal laws relating to students with disabilities, first and foremost. But I think my biggest message related to Fund 27 is a tool, if you haven't utilized yet, is reaching out to Rachel Zelmer at the DPI to talk through your special education funding with an expert, with her, to say, what are we missing? Where could we be more efficient? She's so helpful and so knowledgeable. And so shy of all the advice that we've already given on these calls about Fund 27, I think setting up a call with the DPI to understand in a greater detail what you could be doing, I think is critical. And then
Yeah, and I'll just chime in a little bit because our previous webinar, Elise, was about maximizing categorical aid, but this is the other side of the coin. How are you going to try to minimize those costs? And it can be tricky because it's a right to FAPE for children with special needs, and going about the process, I actually did analysis for my current district, and we were not only did we have more students with special needs than significantly more than the average, but we were able to work with that, and our costs per student with disabilities was substantially higher. So it can be a tricky thing to try to whittle that away in a way that doesn't impede on children's rights and their support, et cetera. And use the term a case-by-case analysis. To a certain extent, it is that writ large.
Yep. Can't just really apply broadly a tip or a trick, other than make sure that you're doing your Act 221 analysis. That's an easy one and usually low-hanging fruit for most districts. But like I said, reach out to the DPI, reach out to John. He's an expert too.
Act 221. Maybe I'm not an expert. Help me.
Act 221, it's now considered, it's now a way longer term for the DPI. It's like eligible personnel services. So it's ensuring that portions of your nurse, your social worker, your psychologist get coded to special ed and are eligible for categorical aid. That's the high level. Okay, finally, your time is money. So make sure that you are enacting and living processes in your business office that save your district time and money. Okay, so first and foremost, be accurate the first time. Membership audits are costly on the revenue limit. And it's time it's something that happens once every 3 years naturally, but if you are accurate and correct and you set up good processes ahead of time, you won't suffer the penalty if you have miscounted a student. Grants can quickly and easily get out of hand if you don't have good processes set up to manage your grants effectively throughout the year. So make sure that your financial software matches WISE grants, matches your budget in all areas. Alignment there ensures seamless grant claiming throughout the year. And then use on large cost centers where you're able to. Grabbing, $50 in supplies here and $12 in other there is not probably the best use of your time as it relates to claiming grant dollars. Be as efficient as possible as you can. And then I know some districts will claim, a portion of someone's salary throughout the year in order to kind of manage grants, or they'll have like half of them budgeted here and another half of them budgeted there. Would it make sense to budget someone 100% on a grant until they're claimed instead of a portion throughout the year? It's just more efficient for your time if it makes sense and falls within the parameters of the grant. Within your financial software, there's a Skyward conference next week. I hope some of you are planning to go to it because they have some really good sessions on how the financial software is meant to work for you and make your job easier. There are a number of efficiencies within your financial software that can help you save time. You can import journal entries. You can import your budget. You can import cash receipts instead of keying in certain items line by line. You can create e-payments. You can be clearing checks with a click of a button. So if some of those haven't been set up in your Skyward yet, they exist and they can help save you time. And then I mentioned utility meters in things like your cafeteria, your weight room, or your pool to help spread out the utility costs to a few other funds if it makes sense for you. If your food service is already operating at a deficit, it doesn't make sense to charge additional costs to food service. So these are some ideas, but they may not make sense for everybody. And then finally, just super aware that we're well over time. I apologize. I think we had some really good discussion, so I hope it was worth everyone's time. Is there anything else for the good of the group that we can share to enhance revenues or reduce expenditures?
I have a question. If you could comment on managing income from sale of district real estate.
Oh boy, that's an interesting one. So, for example, selling a parcel of land or the like, or selling a school. Is that kind
Right,
of what you're
that's
talking?
what I'm thinking of.
So, depending on where you are in the state, school buildings may be very difficult for you to sell. Even in Southeast Wisconsin here, the school district of Cudahy, I know that they had a little bit of a tough time selling one of their buildings. We have some real estate contacts that can help give quotes for certain buildings depending on where you are in the state, the size of the building, and really the market, what could be available to convert that building to help get like the best quotes. But as it relates to handling the revenue, so a couple things to keep in mind. One is that what is the impact of that revenue on the district's shared cost? So if you receive that revenue in 1 year and you don't have a balancing expenditure to match it, or if you're using it to balance your budget, it may have an impact on your shared cost for the purpose of state equalization aid next year. So knowing what that impact might be, if anything, is, I think, really important. And then really how that revenue, how that sale gets gets designated then, right? Is the expectation that the revenue from that parcel of land that it gets used to go towards something specific. I don't know. Sometimes there's contracts that go into specific about what the revenue is meant to be used for. I know that's kind of specific. Did I help answer your question, Peter? I'm sorry. I don't know if that helped.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Yeah, the shared cost thing is interesting, Elise, because I would wonder that has potential to really blow things up. I would wonder about potentially investing the proceeds from that sale and using the interest as income over the course of time. And you could even cut into the principal and pay attention to where your shared cost goes and stay with trying to get as much aid as you can. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. So we have a district who's negatively aided, and if they received, they are selling a parcel of land. If they record their revenue in 1 year and don't make a corresponding expenditure of some kind to make it net neutral for shared costs, their aid was expected to go up the following year. A district who's positively aided might see the opposite effect. They receive the revenue and they don't have a corresponding expenditure. All other things being equal, they might expect their aid to go down.
Other thoughts out there from the field about or questions or other strategies folks have used? All right. The only other thing I was thinking about, at least as you were talking, I remember, well, this is probably 5 or 8 years ago, was a year when the state budget held the revenue limit steady but added more state aid, which has happened. And in that year, the district, I was at an annual meeting, the district's mill rate went down substantially. It was the lowest they had ever had in terms of a mill rate. So they were talking about some strategies for mill rate smoothing. And as you were talking about Fund 80, Fund 41, Fund 46, all these opportunities to potentially put money into one of those places if you're in that situation so that you have a rather steady mill rate and don't have these sort of wild ups and downs. People know what to expect. I think there's some opportunities there. What Paul was saying with regard to Fund 80 and the impact on mill rates, the flip side of that equation is also true, right? If you have a very low, if you're going to have a drop in your mill rate, it's one place where you could park some money, so to speak, so that you don't have, if you did have a regular Fund 80 expense, you could fill that account with some extra dollars that you could use over the course of the following 3 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There are budget management strategies and funds kind of that work within the budget. And then there are your levy strategies where you can potentially utilize funds outside of the revenue limit levy in order to manage your mill rate. So some of them have budget and levy impacts. Some of them have only budget impacts. Some of them have only levy impacts. So if you are confused or would like to make sure that it's exactly what you're thinking, please reach out to our team. We would really like to walk through it with you.
Yeah, that's excellent. All right. Well, we are significantly over time. And nobody left. Maybe one person left. And this tells me 2 things. First of all, interesting topic, great facilitation. Thank you for sharing all of that. And just super interesting as we get through this. Nobody knew getting into education administration that they were going to have to be experts in sort of the intricacies of the woofer system and how to make all this stuff work. So really appreciate your time, Elise. Thanks very much to Baird for all 3 sessions. And thanks everybody for joining us today. This will be posted on our YouTube channel. We're glad to provide this kind of a service to everybody. And we will see you down the road.
Thanks, everybody.